quickly into the second question, and well, Cilna, maybe this is more for discussion than a question. You were recently on ENCA, and you were dealing with the hijacked buildings, and the reason for that is recently there's been a fire outbreak in the Joburg CBD where I think over 70 lives were lost due to well, that fire outbreak, what happened in a hijacked building. And maybe just because you were obviously in the interview, maybe just tell us quickly, maybe first of all, what is a hijacked building? So maybe our viewers don't know exactly what's actually the definition of a hijacked building, all right? And then also, what are some of the challenges that are faced when it comes to evicting people that are in a hijacked building, all right? I'm assuming it's not as simple or as easy when it's a residential property with a 2-bedroom or whatever. And then maybe lastly, maybe just then touch on as well as perhaps eviction laws, like do laws need to perhaps be tweaked or looked at again when it comes to maybe facing or overcoming hijacked buildings? And then maybe lastly, from a political side, maybe you can maybe touch on the fact that there's now been a commission of inquiry, I believe, has been brought into play, where there's going to be a committee set up by the Gauteng Premier to actually look into what actually happened throughout that building. And then what they will be doing, obviously, some political parties have chosen to actually oppose that. So maybe just touch on a bit of that as well.
And
yeah,
I
think the question might be longer than the answer.
Yeah.
My choice of outfit today puts me in a tricky one, but so I do want to clarify that I obviously answer all of these in my capacity as the MD of SSLR, but because of my affiliation to Rise and Mzansi, I am not speaking on behalf of Rise, but we obviously share one heart, so I'm very happy to do that as well. All right, so if we look at the fire last week, the first thing that I would like to say, it's heartbreaking for me that we've had 75 people pass away, and out of that, the thing that came out of it was a lot of drama and more things that caused more pain on top of this. It pained me that as South Africans, instead of saying, whoa, let's stop, there's 75 people that died today, instead of stopping and taking a moment and saying, how can we help? How can we help with people who doesn't now have passports or IDs because it burned down? There are funerals, burials that has to happen by sunset or within a certain time period. How can we help? Instead of that, the response in a big way was, yeah, but it's a lot of illegal immigrants. Let's talk about immigration law, stuff like that. It pains me that we are so heartbroken in our country that we almost couldn't take the time to appreciate that moment and just allow ourselves to mourn the death of 75 people. So that was a shocking moment for me to appreciate that that's where we are. But having said that, I think what it did highlight was the issue around hijacked buildings. Now, it's important to appreciate the fact that, and I'm glad I get the opportunity to say this, it's important to appreciate that hijacked buildings doesn't just happen in Johannesburg. This is a thing we see in a lot of metropolitans and also in other towns. It's a thing. This particular building that we're talking about here, this building belongs to the city of Johannesburg. So what happened is a lot of buildings, there was about 150, I'm under correction on the exact number, buildings that was expropriated in around 2016. The intention of those expropriations were to sell it off to private landlords as part of the inner city revival process. Unfortunately, what happened was the plan wasn't executed in full. So the buildings were expropriated and there were lease agreements signed. In this particular building, the lease agreement was signed, the lease agreement lapsed. Obviously, through 2020, 2021, a lot of things just stood still. And this particular lease in that building that burnt down wasn't renewed. So keep in mind, just for the sake of our viewers, a lease agreement that comes to an end doesn't automatically go away. You will continue on a month-to-month basis. So this lease agreement still continued. And how hijackings typically work is you suddenly have people arriving on the scene and they start collecting rent. Unfortunately, and this I can say quite clearly in Johannesburg specifically, there are unfortunately a lot of parties involved in building hijackings. So suddenly somebody rocks up, the big guys, and they start collecting rent. The landlord by that time lost interest. I mean, the landlord rented the property out, but obviously lost a bit of interest on this or focus on the building. And the tenant that was supposed to regulate this right of occupation lost interest in the building, and these things happen. The problem is, in a hijacked building, how you define a hijacked building is the person collecting rent isn't the person with the right of occupation. So it's not the owner, it's not a tenant that has the right to rent the property out. A hijacked building is where somebody collects rent, and typically that's not the kind of landlord that cares about a tenant's safety. So the rent in these kind of buildings, and it's a horrible living environment, is between 1,200 and 1,500 rand. So it's relatively high rent for what these tenants got. It's heartbreaking. And what happened in this particular case is obviously somewhere the fire broke out and people couldn't get out of the building effectively because the building wasn't maintained. So I think there's a twofold thing in this. On the one hand, is there is nothing wrong with our eviction legislation in South Africa. The law is not the problem. We have section 26 of the Constitution, which says a person may not be evicted unless a court orders that eviction. That eviction may only be granted once the personal circumstances of this person has been taken into consideration. On the back of that, we have the Prevention of Illegal Evictions Act. That act defines what we need to take into consideration when we bring an eviction application. That's not where the problem lies. The law isn't the problem. The legislation isn't the problem. The problem is execution of an eviction in court. We go to court, we can be as effective as we want to be. If you have parties interfering with the intention to delay your eviction, a party that is supposed to protect people's dignified housing, appearing at the court date to intervene, to delay the process, I can categorically state, is not with the intention to get people dignified housing. To get people dignified housing, we need to allow the court to grant eviction orders effectively. What we need is municipalities to come in and to actually provide alternative accommodation, dignified alternative accommodation, not tents with this much water running through them. That's not dignified alternative accommodation. And we need our courts to step up and order municipalities where the municipality simply says, I don't have alternative accommodation. I'm sorry, municipality, you need to do better. And the parties that are protesting against evictions should actually shift their attention from just trying to stop an eviction and switch that focus to what does dignified accommodation looks like. Because I can promise you, a building like this where there are about 200% more occupants than what the building can hold, that's not the accommodation that people deserve. And I think that's the kind of things we need to start talking about. And I'm proud in all of this to be an eviction specialist firm and to have friends like Bruno and Greg who does evictions, because the thing is, when we do evictions in buildings like this, it's not because we want to put people on the street. We want to enforce an obligation on the municipality to provide alternative accommodation that is actually safe and dignified, so that we can stimulate investor confidence, so that we can start getting investments in proper, safe, lower cost housing. So, sorry, I'm clearly quite passionate about this one, but I find it very frustrating that the same people, and be it organizations or political parties, that protest outside court against an eviction are now also the same people that are pointing fingers to the court and to the law to say, but evictions aren't being granted quick enough and effectively enough. I think the thing is, what we need to do as people of South Africa is we need to stop and appreciate that whether somebody is a foreign national or a South African national, it's a human life, and children must be raised in safe accommodation. Every human life is worthy of protection, and when it comes to dignified housing, I think we have a very long way to go. So I think if we can pause on this one and really look at the law as the protector of human life and not the thing that's standing in the way of, you know, a good story on the news. I think that's where we need to be. Did I answer your question? I just went on a rant because this story did break my heart, and the response that did break my heart as well. But I don't think we need any change in law. I think we need our courts to run more effectively, and I don't think we need people to intervene at the last minute to delay an eviction.
Yeah. No, you did answer the question. I tried to make sure that the PLA gets their own interview. So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, you did answer the question. Obviously, it's an ongoing conversation, and we'll be keeping our eyes closed, and maybe we'll do another episode on the new developments regarding that. But that does bring us to the end of today's 2 questions, and we'll see everybody again next week. Thank you for joining us.
Cool.
Thank
Thanks,
you
guys.
so much.